she never thought her beliefs would be challenged. For Olivia, love had rules, and race was one of them. It wasn't hate, she told herself. It was just the way things were. Love, in her eyes, should be simple, predictable, and within boundaries that society had long established. But life doesn't follow the rules we set for it. This is the story of how everything she believed was shattered in a single moment. A story of how walls built over years of prejudice can come crashing down in an instant. It started like any other day, a cold, crisp February evening, the city streets alive with the buzz of Valentine's Day. Couples strolled hand in hand, laughter and whispered promises filling the air. But for Olivia, love was nothing more than a carefully crafted illusion, until she met the one person she thought she could never love. This is her story, the moment that changed everything. The cafe was warm, a welcome contrast to the biting February air outside. The scent of freshly brewed coffee drifted through the air, mingling with the sweet aroma of pastries. Soft jazz played from the overhead speakers, and the low hum of conversation filled the space. The tables were filled with couples, hands intertwined, eyes locked in quiet devotion. Valentine's Day had transformed the little cafe into a haven of warmth and love. At one table near the window, Olivia stirred her coffee absent-mindedly, her eyes scanning the room. She wasn't alone. Her best friend Sarah sat across from her, scrolling through her phone between sips of her latte. They had been meeting at this cafe for years, a tradition of sorts. But today, Olivia was distracted. Her gaze settled on a couple seated a few tables away. She nudged Sarah's arm. "Look at them," she muttered, tilting her head slightly in their direction. "Who? Them?" Olivia whispered, her voice sharp with disapproval. A young white woman sat across from a black man, the two of them laughing as they leaned in close, their fingers grazing over the table. Olivia's lips pressed into a thin line. "It's so weird. A black guy with a white girl. I just don't get it." Sarah finally looked up, her brows furrowing. "Liv, what the hell?" "What?" Olivia scoffed, leaning back in her chair. "I'm just saying people should stay in their own lane. It's not natural." Sarah exhaled, setting her phone down. "It's 2025, Liv. Are you seriously still thinking like this?" "I'm not racist," Olivia said quickly, lifting her cup to her lips. "I just think some things make more sense. This doesn't." Sarah shook her head, her expression unreadable. "Do you even hear yourself? You sound exactly like those people who say they aren't racists, but then turn around and—" "I don't hate anyone, Sarah," Olivia interrupted, her voice edged with frustration. "I just think people should stick with their own kind. That's how things have always been." Sarah sighed, watching her friend carefully. "And why do you think that?" Olivia didn't answer right away. She wasn't sure. It wasn't something she had ever questioned. It was just the way things were. The conversation hung between them, heavy and unspoken. Sarah eventually picked up her phone again, shaking her head. But Olivia's gaze lingered on the couple across the room. The white woman was laughing, tilting her head back slightly as the man reached for her hand. Olivia didn't realize she was staring until the man's gaze flickered toward hers. Daniel. She didn't know his name yet, but in a matter of weeks, he would change everything. The door to the cafe swung open, sending a sharp gust of cold air slicing through the warmth. A few heads turned toward the entrance, but Olivia barely noticed until she heard Sarah exhale sharply. She looked up just as he stepped inside. Tall, confident, broad shoulders wrapped in a well-fitted coat, his deep brown eyes scanned the room with quiet ease, as if he belonged anywhere he went. He wasn't loud or attention-seeking, yet the space around him seemed to shift, as if people instinctively made room for his presence. Olivia stiffened. "Ugh, not another one," she muttered under her breath, just loud enough for Sarah to hear. Sarah turned to her sharply. "Liv, seriously, you're embarrassing yourself." Olivia rolled her eyes, and picked up her coffee, pretending to be uninterested. But she was interested. Not in the way others might be, not in admiration or curiosity. No, it was the kind of interest that came from discomfort, the kind that made her stomach twist. She hated that feeling. Daniel walked past their table, oblivious to the glare she shot in his direction, and made his way to the counter. The barista, a young woman with bright eyes and a cheerful smile, greeted him warmly. "Hey, Daniel, your usual?"
He grinned. "You know me too well." Sarah smirked and leaned toward Olivia. "Oh, looks like he's a regular here. Guess you'll have to deal with that." Olivia scoffed, stirring her coffee aggressively. "Great." Daniel moved toward the pickup counter, waiting for his drink. As fate would have it, his order was placed right next to Olivia's table. He stepped closer, reaching for his cup just as Olivia pushed hers aside. "Excuse me, miss," he said, his voice smooth but polite. She barely looked at him. "Yeah, whatever." Daniel paused for a fraction of a second, eyes flickering toward her before he simply nodded and walked away. If he felt insulted, he didn't show it. Sarah gaped at her. "Jesus, Liv, you're actually unbelievable." Olivia shrugged, sipping her coffee. "I don't care." But that wasn't entirely true. She didn't like the way her heart pounded in her chest, the way her pulse picked up speed the moment she locked eyes with him. It was an ugly, foreign feeling, one she couldn't explain. She wanted to believe it was disgust, but deep down, a tiny voice whispered something else. Fear. Not of him, not of anything he had done, but of what she couldn't control. And the universe, it wasn't done with her yet. It started happening more often than Olivia was comfortable with. At first, she convinced herself it was just a coincidence. The world was small, after all. People ran into each other all the time. But as the weeks passed and she kept seeing him, at the gym, at the grocery store, even at the library, coincidence began to feel like something else, something she didn't like. It was as if fate had decided to challenge her directly, to force her to see him as more than just a black man, to make her question the things she had always believed. But she fought it hard. She ignored the moments when their eyes met across a room. She dismissed the strange twinge in her chest whenever he smiled at someone. Not at her, of course. He had no reason to. The way she had dismissed him at the cafe had probably made that clear. Still, the universe didn't seem to care about what Olivia wanted. The grocery store encounter was the one that unsettled her the most. She was standing in the coffee aisle, scanning the shelves for her usual blend, when she felt someone step beside her. She didn't have to look to know who it was. "Oh, you again." Daniel's voice carried that same relaxed amusement she had heard in the cafe. She tensed but didn't turn. "Yeah, guess so," she muttered, grabbing the last bag of her favorite coffee before he could. Daniel smirked. "Don't worry, I won't take the last one." She expected sarcasm or irritation, but there was nothing in his tone except light humor. When she finally glanced at him, she saw something that caught her off guard. Patience. She wasn't sure why, but it unnerved her. Daniel took a step back, giving her space, then picked up a different brand of coffee without hesitation. No frustration, no confrontation, just kindness. For the first time, she noticed something else about him. His presence was steady, assured, not in an arrogant way, but in a way that suggested he had learned at some point in his life how to navigate spaces that weren't always welcoming. That realization sat uncomfortably in her chest. She had spent so long defining people by their face, by difference, that she had never stopped to think about the experiences that came with it. The way he carried himself wasn't just confidence, it was resilience. She hated the way her mind clung to that thought. The way her heart seemed to slow just a little as he gave her a nod and walked away, leaving her standing there, staring after him. She tried to brush it off. It was nothing, just another stranger. But she wasn't so sure anymore. For the first time, the walls she had built so carefully around herself didn't feel as solid as they used to. The city had quieted down, the energy of Valentine's Day fading into the cold February night. Olivia stood alone at the bus stop, hugging her coat tightly around her body. The street lamp above flickered slightly, casting uneven light onto the sidewalk. She glanced at her phone. The next bus wouldn't arrive for another 15 minutes. The street was empty except for a few passing cars and the occasional pedestrian walking briskly to escape the cold. She exhaled, her breath visible in the freezing air, and tried not to focus on the eerie silence creeping in around her. Then footsteps, slow, deliberate, approaching from behind. She stiffened. A group of men, 3 of them, maybe 4, laughed among themselves as they neared the bus stop. Their voices were low but carried just enough for her to catch snippets of their conversation. She didn't recognize them, but the way they moved, the way their gazes locked onto her, made her pulse quicken. One of them stepped closer. "Hey, sweetheart, you look lonely. Want some company?"
Olivia's grip on her purse tightened. She looked away, hoping they would take the hint, but their laughter only grew. "What's wrong? Not friendly?" Her heart pounded. She willed the bus to appear, but the street remained empty. Another one leaned in slightly. "Come on, don't be rude." She opened her mouth to tell them to back off, but before she could say a word, another voice, calm, steady, and unmistakable, cut through the night. "She's not interested. Move along." The laughter died instantly. The group turned to see Daniel standing a few feet away, hands in his pockets, his expression unreadable. For a moment, silence stretched between them. Then one of the men scoffed. "And who the hell are you?" Daniel didn't flinch. "Someone who can see she doesn't want to be bothered." There was something in his voice, something unshaken, unafraid. He wasn't being aggressive, wasn't posturing or threatening. He was simply stating a fact. The men exchanged glances, muttering something under their breath before stepping back. "Whatever, man. She's not worth it." And just like that, they walked away. Olivia let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. Her hands were shaking, but she forced herself to stay composed. Daniel turned to her. "You okay?" She swallowed hard. I just... The words wouldn't come, not because she was shaken, but because she didn't know how to process what had just happened. It wasn't just relief, she felt. It was something worse. Shame. Because standing in front of her, offering protection without hesitation, was the same man she had dismissed. The same man she had belittled in her mind. The same man she had looked at with quiet disdain, as if he was less than. Yet here he was. She had spent her whole life believing people like him were different, that they weren't like her, that they didn't belong in her world. But tonight, when she needed help, when she needed someone to step up, it wasn't someone who looked like her who had been there. It wasn't the men she had grown up around. It was Daniel. She looked at him, truly looked at him, and for the first time, she didn't see him through the lens of everything she had been taught. She just saw a man, a good man. She swallowed. "Daniel, He shook his head, offering her a small, knowing smile. "Don't mention it." Then, as if nothing had happened, he simply turned and walked away. She watched him go, her mind spinning, and for the first time in her life, Olivia wasn't sure what she believed anymore. The cafe felt different this time. Maybe it was the way the sunlight streamed through the windows, casting soft golden hues across the wooden tables. Or maybe it was just Olivia. Maybe she was the one who had changed. She sat at her usual table, hands wrapped around a warm cup of coffee. The same cafe, the same scent of roasted beans in the air, the same soft hum of conversation. But she wasn't the same woman who had sat here weeks ago, making quiet remarks about a black man she didn't even know. And now that same man sat across from her, Daniel. She had asked him to meet her here. She hadn't even been sure he would come. But he had. And now here they were, sitting face to face. There was an ease about him, the same calm presence he carried everywhere. He stirred his coffee casually, as if this was just any other meeting between two acquaintances. But Olivia felt the weight of it, the significance of this moment. She took a deep breath, staring down at the steam rising from her cup.
I used to think, she started, then hesitated, biting the inside of her cheek. She had rehearsed this moment in her head over and over, but now that she was here, the words felt heavy. Daniel said nothing, just waited. She looked up, forcing herself to hold his gaze. I used to believe in things that weren't true, and I'm sorry. The words hung in the air between them, and for the first time in a long time, Olivia felt raw, exposed. Daniel studied her for a moment before setting his spoon down. Then, instead of the reaction she expected, disbelief, anger, maybe even indifference, he smiled. Hate is a habit, but love is a choice. She blinked, caught off guard. She had spent weeks wrestling with guilt, expecting that no amount of regret could ever be enough. Yet here he was, meeting her apology with quiet understanding. Do you really believe that? She asked, her voice quieter now. I have to. Otherwise, what's the point?
She nodded slowly, rolling his words over in her mind. She thought about the moment at the bus stop, the fear she had felt when those men had approached her, and then the overwhelming shame that had followed when she realized who had come to her defense. She had spent so much of her life convinced that people like Daniel were different, that there was an invisible line between them that shouldn't be crossed. But that night, when she had needed help, that line had disappeared. And now, sitting across from him, she realized something else. Maybe that line had never really existed. She took a sip of her coffee, letting the warmth settle in her chest. You know, she said after a pause, I used to think people like me couldn't change. Daniel tilted his head slightly. And now? She exhaled slowly, the corners of her mouth lifting just slightly. Now, I think maybe we can. His smile grew, and for the first time she didn't just see him as a black man sitting across from her. She just saw him, a person, a man, a friend, and maybe, in time, something more. The cafe bustled around them, but Olivia barely noticed. For the first time in a long time, she wasn't carrying the weight of old beliefs, of silent judgments. She was just here. And on that Valentine's Day, Olivia made her choice. Not every love story starts with love. Some begin in the shadows of prejudice, in the silence of unspoken beliefs, in the weight of lessons passed down without question. Some stories start with hate, ignorance, but also the courage to change. Olivia never thought she would be the kind of person who questioned her own beliefs. She never thought she would look at someone she had once dismissed and see something different. But change doesn't ask for permission. It comes when you least expect it, sometimes in the form of a quiet moment, sometimes in the form of a stranger who refuses to meet hate with hate. Daniel hadn't tried to change her. He hadn't lectured her, hadn't demanded an apology. He had simply existed, moving through the world with patience and quiet resilience. And in doing so, he had forced her to look at herself, to confront the uncomfortable truth that maybe, just maybe, she had been wrong. But change isn't just about realizing the truth. It's about what you do with it. For Olivia, the hardest part wasn't admitting she had been wrong. It was understanding that she had the power to choose something different, to reject the habits she had been taught, to unlearn, to see. Maybe love had never been about rules or boundaries or staying in your own lane. Maybe love wasn't about race at all. Maybe love was about choosing, every day, to see the humanity in someone else. Maybe love was about letting go. As she sat in that cafe, across from a man she had once seen as different, Olivia realized that change wasn't an event. It wasn't a single moment or a dramatic transformation. It was a series of small choices, tiny shifts in perspective, the quiet undoing of a lifetime of beliefs. She didn't know where this would go. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time, she was willing to find out. And maybe that was enough. If you believe love is stronger than hate,
If you believe people can change, if you believe that understanding is possible, then this story isn't just Olivia's, it's all of ours. Tell us your thoughts. Have you ever had your perspective changed in an unexpected way? Do you know someone who overcame prejudice to find love? We want to hear your story in the comments. And if you believe in the power of love, hit that like button, share this video, and subscribe for more real stories that matter. Because the world doesn't change with one big moment. It changes one heart at a time.